All right, I guess let's call for opens. Does anyone have stuff for today?
I'd like to know how to coordinate changes between the main EDK2 repo and EDK2 base tools, because I need to make a commit a change that changes build underscore C flags, just C flags, when building base tools. And when using base tools from the pip repo, it breaks. So since it is a breaking change across the two repos, there's going to have to be some way of coordinating when to commit that.
Okay, Christine is on. I think she's our best point there.
Yes, and I think currently we have to sign the two series of patch, both based on the ETK2 and the base tools repo. And we will merge the patch into the base tools repo firstly, and then merge the code into the ETK2 repo, and to promise that functions are all in these two repos. So
Okay.
maybe you can send a series of patch based on the base tools repo.
Yeah, I can send that out. Do changes to the EDK2 base tools repo also go to the main mailing list?
Yes, I think it can trigger by the
Okay,
mailing
thanks.
list.
And then how do we tell everyone to run the pip -r install to update their pip requirements?
I think it's already in the developer documentation to always run pip requirements, and then the CI agents always do it.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, are there other opens today?
I brought up that if Mike Kenny could give a quick overview of some of the Gmok stuff that's in the patch series. We could maybe just look at what that brings and how it works at a high level.
Sounds good. Mike, are you ready to go over that, or do you want to see what other opens we have?
I can add to the list of two others. One is related to the Gmok's code changes, and that's adding more and more C++ code. So I'm curious what our uncrustify policy is towards C++ files.
I think right now there's a file filter to only do it on .c and .h files. So I think if they're .cpp, it won't pick them up. That being said, there wasn't a lot of attention put into C++ features, I guess, and the types of things that you'll get into there if you're defining classes and that kind of, and templates and that kind of stuff. I think that most of that would be left at the default settings.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know what we'd wanted to do as a policy, if we wanted to add CPP files so that they do get processed, or leave them ignored, which seems like that might not be the best approach. Even if the formatting that it does is not ideal, at least it would be consistent, right?
Right. Yeah, I think we could start by just running it locally and seeing for the given code what we get back, and then tweak it if we need to. I don't think we're going to be writing C++ that's significantly different from our C code, to my understanding here. So, or are we? Do you know if we're using like a lot of C++ capabilities, or are we just writing mostly like C code in C++ files?
I think with some of the Google test and Google Mocks styling, you do get a few more of the C++ features being utilized.
Okay. Yeah, then we might need to just take a closer look at what's relevant for us and maybe tweak it just a bit, but I don't think it'd be that much work.
Okay. And we do have a few C++ files already there that I think fit the category you're referring to, which is they look like C code. So from some of the existing test cases that were ported over to the Google test without Google Mock support. So yes, we'll probably have to do a PR to try turning it on for the CPP files and then see what fails and what fixes if the adjustments it's suggesting make sense.
Yep.
Okay. And the second smaller open, Sean, that I can cover really quick is because it's something that I've done by accident. It's the creating a branch in the EDK2 repository by accident. You know, we have branch protection rules on our release branches, stable branches, and obviously the main branch. But I think anybody with write access can go create any other named branch on the EDK2 repo. We're trying to keep it relatively clean. So I've gone through and enabled some additional branch protection rules on the EDK2 repository to hopefully prevent accidental creation of branches there by any of our maintainers. I don't think it stops any of the admins from doing so. I think they always can do anything they the full access no matter what. But if anybody sees any side effects from those new branch protection rules I put in place, please let me know or let this team know as quickly as possible so we can get them adjusted. I did recognize that the Dependabot agent also creates branches, PRs against the in a branch within the repository. So I continue to allow those to be created so that the Dependabot agent will continue to run.
Okay, sounds good.
And so then for the let's see if there's any opens from anybody else so we can add them to the agenda, and then I can cover the GMOX topic.
What policy did you use to actually block creation of branches?
Well, you can use the branch name asterisk, which means all, and that one is like the secondary one that if they're named branches, those are higher priority than the ones with just asterisks. So I basically say that anything with asterisks is protected. You can't create. So then that prevents anybody from creating a branch, but it does allow the branches that are there to fall back to the rules that are there for the named branches.
Okay, fair enough.
And then I added another one for Dependabot /star that allows it to be created.
Okay, thanks. Any other opens from the group?
I may have missed it, but where did we end up on EDK2 platforms switching over to the EDK2 style pull request process? Did that happen or?
Mike, was there any more traction on your RFC statement? I never did reply yet, but go ahead.
No, that was it. I think we're just waiting for you as the next action, Sean, to describe what our plan is to turn on the checks on the feature branches, you know, very shortly after turning on the requirement for a pull request with the push label.
So I think did Marvin knack the RFC?
Yes, and so we have to that's the conversation we want to continue with what our plan is to say that yes, it's extra work, but hopefully within, I don't know what your time frame would be, Sean, that once we turn on that feature, how long it would take for you to turn it on for the feature branches.
I think the feature branches, or sorry, not the feature branches, but the feature packages can be individually enabled, and I think the feature package that Marvin cares about is already enabled in my prototype, so I think it can be turned on.
So I think the reason he knacked it was he wants the full pull request thing without like just being able to go in, create a pull request and just hit merge in the UI and not still have to send emails.
Okay, that's not how I interpreted it, Rebecca, so that's good feedback. I
Okay,
guess we get clarity on that.
yeah, there was discussion on the Discord group.
Okay, and I think our other concern was that we really still don't have very strong ownership here. And as we know, CI will break, services will change, things will happen, and without ownership of the repo owners, there's some concern of enabling this process.
Has there been any consideration about using code owners?
That's
For
part of
sure.
what I'm looking, that's part of what I've got a prototype of, Rebecca, but it's incomplete at this point.
Oh, okay.
But by the way, just code owners is incomplete for our process because code owners does not distinguish a maintainer from a reviewer. So I had to implement extensions that introduce a reviewers file as well. And then the code owners is managed by the GitHub automated processes, and the reviewers file is processed by a GitHub action.
That's strange that GitHub doesn't have a native way of doing that. Or I wonder what other projects do.
They don't use code owners if they have that reviewer maintainer split.
So it's not possible to say in code owners, we need, these people must review it and these people are optional?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Our rules of, you know, reviewers can review, but you have to have either a reviewed by or an act by the maintainers. That level of flexibility is not supported in code owners.
Okay, so I can take the next action to give Marvin the updated plan. Again, I still think that there's some concern around keeping this thing running after the initial proof of concept. As we all know, it's not free. And Mike, I don't think you or I are necessarily signed up for that role.
Right. You're talking about the admin part of the CI process, right?
Yeah, and just keeping it active and current and owning those files that are related to the CI process and, you know, making it work for the repo, right?
Right, but we, like in the EDK2 repo today, you know, we collectively like update the CI settings.py file and things like that as needed, right? It's not single ownership for that. The only single ownership there is the link to like Azure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, I mean, I think so myself or my team takes it upon us when the CI goes down to then figure out what's going on and fix things, right? And I think there's been a few times each year that that's happened, and we'll need someone to do that on the other side of EDK2 platforms as well.
Yes, agreed.
Okay, any other opens from anyone? The last thing I had that Rebecca reminded me, Christine, when I look at the EDK2 base tools project, right, we talked about how basically the README file is some crazy mix that doesn't quite match the project. For example, the code contribution process defined there does not mention the mailing list. It mentions using pull requests, and that was intentional. We were planning to use this repository for pull requests. It also just is out of date and incorrect in a lot of spaces. I thought a few weeks ago we talked about trying to get this revamped and cleaned up.
Okay, I will check about that README file and to modify them and send out a patch or with the mail list and let's see the new one if it is okay.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, Sean, is that we thought we had a plan for good base tools maintainership, and it appears that it's not working. So we have to get some more resources applied to the base tools in general, to both the repo and the base tools directory.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, I've had problems getting reviews. When I've sent out patches, yeah, I've been having troubles getting reviews for base tools for the directory in EDK2.
Yep, and I've been sending emails directly to the maintainer notifying them of that, and they've not been responding, Rebecca. So
Okay.
I understand your frustration on that. I am equally frustrated, and so that's why I said I think we have to find different maintainers.
Yeah, I mean, I might be interested in. I've been doing a lot of work on base tools, so I might be interested in being added as a maintainer.
Okay.
All right, so I think, Mike, the GMOC question to you.
Okay. So I said I'm not the expert on exactly how the mechanics work underneath the covers on adding GMOC. I can explain the problem statement and what work's been done, so that from the experience of writing test cases, it's not too bad. So first of all, there is Google Test that's already there. So the patch series that went out for review adds Google Mock support. The number one challenge with Google Mocks is that it is, from a fundamental design perspective, is focused on C++ code and does not natively support doing mocking of C code. And so there's some extra work you have to do to get it to work with C code. And as part of that work, one of the other things that we recognize is if you're doing host-based unit testing following the formal definition of that, not only do you need to be able to mock maybe external calls outside of the file under test, you may have to mock functions that are actually within the same file. Think of them as internal worker functions. So if you're trying to test each individual C API as an individual unit, then even calls to other C functions within that single C file are things that you want to be able to mock. Well, the challenge with linkers in general, without using some proprietary features of different compiler and linker tool chains, there isn't a standard C way to do that. So that's why the first thing that's going in as part of this patch series is a submodule called Subhook. So what Subhook does is it effectively will patch the code at the call target to be able to redirect it to a different location, effectively hooking that API. And it does that at runtime. And it will even do it for the way it works with Google Test within the scope of a single test suite or single test case. You can have it hook the code that you want mocked, the API that you need mocked, and it will set up the subhook mock for that internal function, and then it will unwind that, put it back at the end of the test case so that each individual test case can choose different combinations of mocks that it needs active for the test case that's being executed at that time. So that's a submodule that's being added within the unit test framework package called Subhook. And there's the CI settings update for that as well. And then the big change is adding the Google Mock support to the unit test framework package and extending the Google test lib to support Google Mocks as well. And what the part of that that's being added there, that is the piece that's needed to support C code, is there's some interesting new macros that are being added that effectively takes any C code that you want to do the testing for or the mocking of, and it puts a C++ wrapper around it. And that's what the macros do. So it's all C++ code from Google Test perspective and Google Mocks perspective, but your target code under test is C code. So it takes care of all those dependencies. There's an update to the README with the full documentation that explains how this works and those macros and the use of those macros. So there's a big update to readme.md in the unit test framework package. And then there's been some examples added into the MDE package, MDE module package, and security package. Part of what has to be added here as well is the big element of any kind of unit testing is checking the results to see if they match expectations. And so Google Test has some built-in matchers, comparators in their C++ classes for some of the basic types. So all of our integer types and things like that are supported. The ones that were not directly supported are our char 16 type, things like EFI GUID or general buffer comparisons. So some extra matchers in C++ were added for char 16 and for buffers. We said for now, for things like GUIDs, that can be done with a buffer compare because that's a 16-byte buffer for the GUID. And then also, when you get to the MDE package, some of the things being added there are what's considered mock libraries, wrappers for things like the runtime services table, the boot services table, things like protocol interfaces, different library interfaces. You can create generic wrappers for those that are the C++ code to do that using those macros. And then that allows you to have mocked interfaces for things that are external to your code under test. So for example, if your code calls a runtime service or a boot service, you can take advantage of those mock libraries that are there. Those mock libraries are not necessarily complete yet. They're just the first version of them that supports the test cases that have been ported so far to the Google Mock style. If, for example, there's a runtime service that's not implemented there yet, you could easily extend that mock library there to support the additional runtime services that you need to use. So you'll have to pay attention to that as well. And then, unfortunately, just going through the process of getting Google Mocks added, I found some other bugs. We had some ANSI conformance issues in the secure boot variable lib test that was there already. That's following our standard CMACA-based, host-based unit testing style, and it had something that was not ANSI compliance that started kicking Visual Studio errors. So I fixed that as well, and also cleared up that host application for today is limited to IA32 and x64 only. So there were some comments and things like that through a number of packages related to host-based unit testing that were listing other architectures. I think maybe Sean, you can answer this one. I think theoretically we could use other host-based architectures for some of the unit test runners. We don't necessarily get better code coverage from it, but it would be possible potentially in the future if there was interest in extending the set of host-based execution environments, correct?
Yeah, and we have briefly looked into it. Nothing great to report just yet.
Okay, so me clarifying it that it's only IA32 and x64 only right now, and then we can add more in the future if they become active and stable. I think that's more interesting for developers if they're doing their development work on a different CPU architecture. They might like to have that capability to run the host-based test in their native development environment CPU type. I think for our CI agents, unless somebody points out a coverage gap in running the host-based unit test in IA32 and x64, I don't see a reason to add more to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, and maybe because it's the I don't know if I've got a version. I have to go back to the branch here. I can maybe share one of the more interesting files, which is this idea of mocking some of the interfaces. Let me know if you can see the sharing.
Yep.
Okay. So this is our UEFI library out of the MDE package. And so this is the mocked version of those that only covers two APIs, get variable 2 and get EFI global variable 2. So this is incomplete. It's only got those two, but this is the style that you have to put in here that for any given library that you want to be able to do the mock interface for, this is like the template that you have to put in for a library. And I've got an example here for the runtime services table as well. But you basically go through the library and you do this mock function declaration with its return type, its name, and its parameter list. And you put these in here. So it's not a lot of code, and it's one-time effort for each library class that you want to have. If you need to mock one or more interfaces from that class, you go through and do this kind of one time, and then you have the basically the support to be able to mock that function as a C call from our test perspective. So that's an example of a library. And then the runtime.
What's it look like in the implementation of that, like calling that mock?
Yeah, I'll get there in a
Okay.
second here. I'll find the example that does it. And then for the runtime services table, here's the one that does that for maybe for get variable and set variable is what they've got here. So and that's the name of that. So the examples of this, the CPP file associated with this is very small. Okay, so there's that .h file, and then there's the CPP file. Once again, it's just using the macros and says it's the name of the mocked library, and then the API, the number of parameters, and its calling convention. Okay, the calling convention was added just for completeness because we use the EFI API for almost all of our external things. If you ever have to do one of these for an internal function, then it may be blank instead of EFI API. And then its INS file is also very straightforward. It's a type host application, and this basically builds the mock UEFI lib, so that's available for that. Now the examples, I have to go find the example here in the MDE package, I think, module package. Give me just a second to find it. That's right, it's buried. Back to the. Okay. All right. So this is one. Let's see if this has got the. I think this is the request to lock. Nope, that was not the right one. That's the sort lib. The sort lib is, I think, it's just standard stuff. It's not the one that does the interesting things. Test around. I wasn't prepared for trying to do a review of this part of it. CPP code unit test. Okay. So here we are. I think that, so this is the one that's pulling in the, hopefully the mocked version. Yeah, so this pulls in the mocked version of both the mock UEFI lib and the mock runtime services table lib. And then your expect call to the RT set variable. So that's the Google mocks style for saying you expect a call to that, and then call secure boot and expect success.
Okay. Thanks for sharing.
So yeah, so this is where all the magic occurs, right? This is what you write as the test case. That you say you expect that call, and you expect it will be called once, and it will return success, and it'll be recalled with these parameters. And so that when it sees that call, it returns success, and then you call this API that's under test, knowing that's going to call this API and expect that return status with those input variables, and then you expect the return from this to be success from the code under test. And there should be another one in here that will call the UEFI lib as well. Here we go, mock UEFI lib, and it calls get global variable 2 once and returns, expects return aborted, and then calls the code under test. So what I recommend is study the examples here and the documentation. If you need any clarifications on the documentation, I think that's the feedback on the PR we're looking for. We went through several iterations of the newly introduced macros to set up the wrappers, the C++ wrappers for our C libraries and C runtime tables, say basically table-based interfaces or protocol interfaces. So if there's anything about those that are don't make sense, or you want to, do the names make sense, that kind of stuff. So we've been through several iterations trying to simplify them as much as possible in order to support this full Google test, Google Mocks infrastructure for C code.
I think what you're showing looks good to me. It looks pretty self-explanatory to look at and understand.
I mean, I think I would suggest we add more comments into the actual test, like the mock calls and why they're going to return a certain way, like the one you have highlighted right now. To me, is confusing to understand what are you actually testing? Why is it going to return aborted, and will require me to think about what's going on. It'd be probably great to see a developer-focused comment there to make that easy.
Right. Yep, I agree. Because like this, and these test cases may not be complete. Like there, you'd obviously want, I think, if you're going to call this API is secure boot enabled, you'd probably want another test where it returns yes, right? So I guess that's this one down here is the one. So yeah, I agree. The comments to say, do the test case where is secure boot enabled is going to return success or return failure based upon the state of the variable store, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think in the more verbose framework, right, we have a description for the test that gives you that opportunity or requires you to fill in that opportunity of like, what's the point of this test? I think in this abbreviated format, it's, obviously it's super nice, but it also is missing context.
Yeah. So yeah, so this, by the way, in Google Test, this is the name of the test suite, and this is the name of the test case, so that it's declarative. You don't do a registration API, which in some respects you lose the ability to put more context in what's there in that registration. But from another aspect, it's much simpler to go add test cases, right? You just go write another test F, and then you pick your suite name and your test case name, and then you write your test case, and then it's automatically detected and executed when you go to run those test cases. So it's a much simpler, you just write your test case and it automatically gets added to the suite and test case list. But agreed, more comments in here for the suite and the test case, what it's testing is required. So I'll give that feedback.
And then is there any concern around compatibility of library instances for host applications? Some of them are going to work with Gmock and some of them are going to work with CMOCA.
So right, so that's why you see, for example, this split here, like in the security package, the ones with the name unit test are our first version of our unit test infrastructure, which can be our target-based test or host-based test with the option of using CMACA in those unit tests. And then the ones with Google test in the path are the ones that use the Google test with the option of using Google Mocks for your mocking infrastructure. So they have different things in there. For example, their INF files are also different because the library classes, for example, in this one has Google test lib in the Google test one. And if we look at the INF for this one, it's incomplete there because it's not showing us everything. It's only a change set. This has the should have the unit test lib in there somewhere. Oh, there it is. That's going to be the one. So yeah, it's got unit test lib. So that's how in the INF file you distinguish which style you're writing.
Okay.
It's Google test lib or unit test lib.
And then I assume since you guys are putting all this effort into enabling Google tests, that's because you have a lot of people that want to write Google tests, or you have a bunch of Google tests already written?
Yes, we have strong interest in using this as a host-based unit test framework for firmware code. And
Right, I think
we added Google test because we were looking in that direction, but hadn't gotten the Mocks thing working yet. And so this is the second half of the work.
okay, sounds good. I think the last time I looked, I think for MDE or MDE module package, we have 3% test coverage. So it would be great to get going on the test part. Yeah.
Agreed completely. And I think we have some interesting things to work on for, do we want to start requiring unit tests with maybe new code, right? New features, as part of our review process. We have not done that yet, but I think that's something for us to consider if we want to, as a community, propose that and then start enforcing that from the reviewers and the maintainers' perspective.
Yep. Sounds good.
And if I
Okay.
guess if you think it'd be valuable, I could bring in the developer that worked on this patch series next week if everyone wants to look at it, and maybe there'd be some more email review comments as well. If we want to have more technical questions on this feature, we can maybe invite them next week.
I think that sounds good.
All right. Any other opens from anybody?
I have one open. The Python VFR compiler's development work almost done, and I want to share the Python VFR compiler to weeks later, because we are under testing now.
Okay.
And that's a complete replacement for the C implementation of the VFR compiler from a feature perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
Was there effort put into making testing not a forethought, not a afterthought?
We are firstly we are currently testing all the functions we know now, but and we will ask we will use some resource from our team to help us to test to do more tests based on the boot aspect. Yeah. And we will test them from compare the VFR's content with the boot, what we can see in the boot. Yeah, use this way to do the compare, because the binary we cannot only to check if the functions are the same from the binary which generated. Because there have some some lines infer and some other consistent infer which cannot be compared through the binary. Yeah, and after we test this, I will send out what on earth we test, and please help to check what we need to do more and less to finish the all the testing work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be great, Christine, if part of your review in 2 weeks is also your kind of your test plan and test methodology, because I think for Python code, we like to see like unit tests for Python code using PyTest or unit test. I forget which one is the recommended one right now for the base tools repo.
Yeah.
And also, I think what you're also referring to is functionality tests to make sure that the behavior of this new compiler is the same as the existing compiler, and probably running lots of platform code through that to see if it behaves the same.
Yes.
And those are interesting kind of cross checks, but they're usually very incomplete in their test coverage. So it's really how do we get to complete test coverage that may be an opportunity for us to have something that it has the ability to, across future changes of the source code, to make sure we don't have regressions.
Yes, I think that is very important.
And could you run PyLlama, please, as well, to make sure it's conforms to the Python standards?
We have a Python coding standard document for EDK2, and it lists the coding standards it's supposed to follow, Rebecca.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've noticed lots of comments and things aren't following the PyDoc standard, but seem to be different.
Correct, but we at least have a document that we've tried to capture like things like PyDocs and unit testing and the code style. So I encourage you to take a look at that and see if it matches your expectation. And then we have the more pressing issue of how to get it consistently applied.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else you want to bring up?
I have one thing, Sean, but it doesn't have to do with CI.
Okay.
Okay,
Fire away.
could you please submit your patch for the security MD?
So the patch is already, it's been on the mailing list for like a few weeks now.
Oh,
no
okay,
one's reviewed it.
Yeah, I didn't see it on the mailing list. That's why
Okay.
I will go.
I
I will go search the mailing list then and see if I see it. Because I know that I had sent it out and asked you to do that, and I never saw it actually hit. I must have missed it.
Yeah, I was gonna follow up the other day. I don't think I did. But it has definitely been out there for a few weeks. I had someone on my team do it. So it won't be from me, but they did include you as a CC'd on the patch.
Okay.
It came out on March 9th. It came out on March 9th, Mickey, from Kuhn.
Okay, I will find it. I must have totally missed it somehow. I'm sorry.
And I'm looking forward to our next security meeting because I do want to see how discussions go and using the new stuff. I've noticed that there's still stuff going through Bugzilla, so yeah.
Yes, I'm just doing those two for right now, and I haven't seen a whole lot of discussion on the patch sets that have come in.
Yeah, maybe we submitted the additional patch or the different patch. But
yes, you did.
I don't think I've seen any feedback either, and we haven't had any conversation. So I agree we need to find a way to have conversation about this.
Yes, and so I planned on bringing that up, that we need more of our people who are on the InfoSec team that are applied to those to actually look at this stuff. Sorry to
right.
hijack your meeting.
All right, anything else for this meeting? All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.
Thank you, bye.